use items in the pouch in front of you.
Have a safe and informative journey.
Hello, I'm Nathan Hartman, and this is Dreamfinders, a podcast about the creative culture of Disney theme parks. Brandon Kleyla, better known as Trader Brandon to his fellow Tiki lovers and friends, has always been obsessed with the intricacies of pop culture, and over time, he's become a part of it himself. From acting on Nickelodeon shows at Universal Studios Florida as a kid to creating a featured documentary on Indiana Jones fan culture, Brandon's career has more twists and turns than an adventure novel. Eventually, though, it all led him to Disney Imagineering, where he became one of the main creative forces behind both Trader Sam's Enchanted Tiki Bar and Grog Grotto, as well as a set decorator for such places as Pandora, the world of Avatar. I was arranging to interview Brandon around the time the quarantine began, and since he was having people on his Instagram feed to chat anyway, he invited me on to interview him live. So fair warning, the audio is a little different this time around, but the content is still tons of fun. Brandon and I chat about his time as a Jungle Cruise skipper, what it's like to work with Joe Rhode, and we dig deep on all things Indiana Jones. All that's coming right up on Dreamfinders. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. We were going to have a conversation anyway on my podcast, and this seems to...
I was going to say, so now we're going to double our audience.
Yeah, two birds, one stone. It's a brilliant call, and I appreciate it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So, let's just begin where it all began, which is where you're back now, Central Florida. You grew up in Central Florida? Is that how?
I did. I was born over in Ormond Beach, over by Daytona. So, yeah, an Ormond kid.
You had the ability to sort of enjoy something that I think a lot of people sort of talk about or think about, which is not only were you around for the 90s, what I guess I'd call the Central Florida Hollywood craze, but you were like a part of it. You were like in it because you did some child acting over at Nickelodeon Studios. So
absolutely over at Nickelodeon, and one of the few people that actually I remember doing stuff at MGM as well when MGM was used as a functioning studio.
Oh, that's wild. What were you in at MGM?
There was the one that comes to mind very well. It's funny because when movies and everything was so big here in Orlando, there was really only a handful of agents. And at the time, and I don't know if it's still a thing, but you could have as many agents as you want. So I had like 5 agents in the same town. So, whoever got you the jobs the quickest. And there was really a little group of us kids that did every job together. We went and did all of the Disney, commercials together. We went and did the Universal commercials. We were like that little group of, families that did all the stuff. So yeah, we did infomercials. We did the commercials. I remember doing an Illuminations commercial in the middle of the night at Epcot once.
Oh, wow.
You can find me on the Easter parade where Nancy Kerrigan is ice skating in front of Magic Kingdom, in front of Cinderella's castle. Really random one. And but yeah, the one that I actually filmed at studios at MGM was for, I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it was Life Cycles. They were the bicycles that were actually in the Wonders of Life.
Okay, yeah.
And they were the bikes that you pedaled and you controlled the video.
Right.
And we did a commercial for them because I think they were trying to sell them to the public as well.
I didn't know that.
And I remember it was just beautifully glorious Disney. I had a Mighty Ducks T-shirt on. It was beautifully 1990s Disney in all the best ways.
Geez, that is. Now the other thing though about Universal, of course, is the big question is, did you ever get slimed? Because that would be the peak of 90s.
I can't say that I did. I will say that for those who remember the Nickelodeon tour, there was the little GAC lab that you used to walk by, and they'd make slime and show you all that. And I remember many times goofing around back in there, and the tour coming by and having the duck beneath that desk when no one else was there. My mom actually chimed in and commented, if any of you have the Disney MGM Studios brochure that has, I believe it's Tower of Terror on the front. It was the one that you could get at like Denny's. That not the park map, but the got the brochure, there's a whole page dedicated to the animation building. And it has an image of Mufasa and Simba jumping off of the screen. And you can see the back of my giant mane of red hair that I used to have when I was about 11 years old. So if any of you have that, I'll be very impressed.
That's something to get signed for sure.
Yeah,
well,
anybody who brings that to me to get signed, I will give you a mug because I will be impressed.
That of course leads to other acting stuff. How'd you get into acting to begin with? Was it just something that you always thought, like, this is something I'm interested in doing? Or, like, was it just one of those things, like, some kids, I feel like they're in a thing extracurricular-wise because they don't know why they got into it, but now they're into it. Was it, like, purposeful, or did you just find yourself like, oh, I guess I'm acting?
I would say it was probably a little of both. My grandfather on my dad's side was a band leader, was an entertainer. So I got all of those genes from him. And we used to put on shows around the house and do all of that, which obviously led to let's go audition for a play and let's do that type of stuff. And then it just kind of, hey, this is fun. This is enjoyable. And then it just snowballed from there. And then being in Orlando, like you said, in the early 90s at the right time and doing a lot of the things and having a blast doing all the Nickelodeon shows and the Disney shows and all that. And then Savannah, Georgia, Atlanta was a big hub of movies back then. Not as much as they are now, obviously, but there was still a lot going on in Georgia in the early 90s. And I remember driving up to Atlanta to audition for my first movie, which I actually ended up getting, which was Now and Then with Demi Moore, and Melanie Griffith, and Christina Ricci, and all the girls. And we shot that up in Savannah. And then I sent in a tape for a little movie called Children of the Corn 4. And we shot that in Austin, Texas. And then we ended up doing some reshoots for that out in California. And then it just snowballed, and it was like once you were in LA, you were in. So
yeah, as they say in Godfather Part 3, like, once you're in, like they pull you right back in. So that's LA.
Yeah, and then being in LA, and being in the hub of it, and working in commercials and everything, and then when you hit that age, like I did, where you're too young to play an adult, but you're too old to play a kid, and you don't work for like 5 or 6 years, you got to find other things to do. And that's when I started doing special effects makeup and writing and directing and learning how to make fiberglass molds. And I mean, just stuff to occupy my time, which ultimately kind of led me to where I am now, I feel.
Well, and what's so kind of interesting about your career path, and we're going to see these little connections as we go along, but like you had, of course, a part in Gods and Monsters, which is about James Whale, and that is, of course, if people who know James Whale, he directed Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and it's just like, these are narrative things in screenwriting that you do to connect people, like in fake biopics, but no,
right.
They're just totally connected. So what was that experience like? I mean, you're in it for a couple scenes, you do have some lines. I mean, you're playing Ian McKellen, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was a trip. I was working on it a little bit before I even auditioned doing the makeup. A friend of mine owned the company that was doing the Frankenstein monster makeup for the film. And then when I went in and auditioned, the director ran out and took my headshot and then came back like 10 minutes later. And I didn't find out later until much later where he went. And turned out that I had just kind of missed Ian, and Ian was still in the parking lot. And he went, "Look at this kid. Look at this headshot." And Ian was like, "Yeah, that's me when I was 14, sure, no question." And it is still kind of freaky. Every once in a while, I'll be scrolling Instagram or something, and occasionally, for whatever reason, a young Ian McKellen photo will pop up, and I will double take and go back and go, "Was that a picture? When did I take that picture?" It was weird.
Yeah, there's enough pictures of you now that are in black and white that it does get kind of confusing. Right. Probably. right.
That look like they're from the 20s and 30s. Yeah, we have fun with those, but.
But my question, of course, is like, were you into Universal Monsters before you were in the movie, or did the research of sort of getting prepared for that movie get you into Universal Monsters?
Oh yeah, no, I'd always loved monsters. I've always loved, again, back to my grandfather with the monsters and King Kong and all those great black and white monster movies. So yeah, it was always a thing. So to get to be a part of that film in any regard, I mean, I was happy helping out with the makeup, but to have one line and then get sprinkled throughout the whole movie, I mean, that's just a great film to be involved with.
Yeah. So you end up going to college and you study both theater arts and archaeology. At least that's what it says online. So was there this desire to just become Indiana Jones full time, like in the real world at some point?
Yeah. Why lie? Why fight it?
Why not though? Why not? Why did you decide archaeology was not? Is it not? There's less traps and fighting Nazis in real archaeology.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't what we were all told it was. No, I did it for the whole time I was in college, and then they ended up shutting our program down.
Oh, wild.
And that was why I didn't finish it and graduate with a degree in archaeology. And I thought about going back and getting it, but I kind of like the story of the fact that, they shut the program down, which is sad. But no, we had a great time. I went on several digs in California as part of class. You know, you had to do your lab work. So lab work meant we're going to go dig and find stuff. And it was really cool. And of course, you know, I was at that age where I'm like, I'm going to wear my fedora and I'm going to wear my little side bag. And everybody thought I was, you know, crazy until I was like, oh, I got all my stuff right here in my bag. Why do you have to walk all the way over there? So everybody kind of just learned to deal with it. But no, it was fun. It was great.
You end up, of course, doing Jungle Cruise skipping for about a year.
I did.
Every skipper has a story that they love to tell. What's that story that you love to tell about being a skipper?
Oh man, I'm trying to think of one I have that I don't frequently tell for everyone's enjoyment. There's so many. I mean, I always like when people go, wasn't that boring? Didn't that get old? It's the same thing every 8 minutes, you know. But every time, you know, you'd load a boat, it was a different experience. So it never got tiring. It never got old. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, you'd have. I always liked the little kids that thought that you could really sell that it was real to them. There's a part on the dock after you unload. There's a middle section that's called No Man's Land, and then it goes to the load station. And I always like to save my reloading of my gun until No Man's Land and do it very serious and very dramatic, because every kid that you knew was going to come and get on your boat was watching you load a gun. And they were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And every once in a while, if you knew you had a couple punk kids, you'd load it and you'd look at them and count them off and then count how many bullets you'd put in your gun and keep going. But no, working grad nights were always fun because it was not what the legend would lead you to believe. Grad nights are usually kids in buses that have been up all day and all night. So by the time they get to Disneyland, they are exhausted. And my favorite grad night story was taking a group of kids around the jungle. And the second I turned the lights off when I left the dock, they fell asleep. And literally slept the entire way until I turned the lights back on. And then they applauded and left. But I didn't say a single word the whole trip.
It's a nice breezy. I mean, you think of places you can have naps at Disney. That's necessarily not one of those that come to mind, but apparently they made it work.
The water will rock you right to sleep.
Yeah, right. So you end up creating Red Dot Film Studios, and you do that for several years, and you do that with your sister, right? Yeah. She's a makeup artist now and working all the time on all sorts of tasks. But yeah, it became kind of the family business. And we ended up just doing a bunch of fun projects. Again, just kind of giving ourselves something to do during that time when it was like, well, I wasn't really acting. So I was like, well, let's go direct something. And, I'll direct something of my own. So yeah, it just became a thing. And through that, we did the Indie Fans documentary and some music videos and some concert videos for MxPx and those guys, which were great. And everything I've done has been a learning experience, and I can look back on anything and go, oh, when I did that, this happens, or when we tried that happened. And even, nowadays I'll be in meetings and go, oh no, I'll call that, I know that guy from
20 years ago, you know, people would be like, how old are you? You're not that, what do you mean? And you're, yeah, oh, I worked with him when I was 12. Yeah, it all comes in handy.
How did you end up, I mean, like when I think of Trader Brandon stuff, MxPx and Insane Clown Posse don't come to mind. But
Yes.
yeah, how did you get connected with, I mean, you seem to end up doing some of these harder, I mean, MxPx isn't hard necessarily, but these hard bands. How did you get connected with these guys?
MxPx was actually, I'll pin that one on my sister. She was a fan, and literally we just reached out and asked, hey, can we shoot a concert for you? And they said, sure, sounds great. Insane Clown Posse was an interesting one because they were connected with my buddy who owns a special effects company, and so he had done a lot of stuff for them. He was doing their music videos for them, building their big stage setups. And the one thing I did for him was one of their gathering events in Cleveland, which was quite an experience. And yeah, not really my scene, but it was, you know, it was fun. It was interesting.
Lots of Faygo for sure. Yeah.
Oh my God, I probably still have spots that are sticky from Faygo. My God. I don't even want to think about it. Yeah.
Were you working on eFans the whole time you were doing everything? I mean, it was, I assume, a multi-year kind of venture because you go everywhere.
Yeah, IndieFans was kind of when we knew that Crystal Skull was going to happen. It was at a time when a lot of people were doing those fan documentaries. There was, I think it was Star Woids or you know, there was a Star Wars one, there was a Lord of the Rings one, there was, you know, a lot of those fan-based documentaries. And just being an indie fan, I went, oh, let's go do that one quick. So we kind of latched onto that one and partnered up with some of those guys and kind of made ourselves known just so nobody else would do one. But yeah, I think we shot that for about a year. We traveled around, went to some locations, sat with a bunch of the original crew. I actually found a box in the closet of DVDs that I put on my website today. I think I've only got one box left to probably collect. Somebody actually says they have Indie Fans on DVD. God bless you. I don't even know where you got that from. But yeah, so I've got a couple I put on the website. But yeah, no, Indie Fans was a lot of fun. And it was just, again, I have found myself being fortunate enough to do stuff that I like. So doing a movie that allowed me to hang out with Vic Armstrong and Deborah Landis is not a bad day in my book.
No, not at all. That's a good day. But you get into Indiana Jones because of the stunt show at Hollywood Studios, right? That was your first connection.
That was the first intro. So yeah, like you said, growing up in Florida, we were about an hour away from the park. Sorry, the guy said he found the DVD at Hollywood Video when they went out of business for $3. That makes me sad and kind of happy that they had it. So we're good either way. So yeah, it was nice because that's when the parks weren't swamped. So I mean, if we wanted to go have dinner and use the pool, we would go to Disney. So yeah, it was great. But yeah, one day I remember we went and watched Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, and I had no idea. I mean, I was young, very young, no idea what it was. Remember sitting all the way in the back on that big planter, just crying my eyes out. And I remember my dad going, we got some movies to watch when we get home. And then it was like, oh, this, okay. And then that just, yeah.
Snowball.
Then we were doomed. Yeah.
The question though is like, did you get to, when you were in Imagineering, did you get to go behind the scenes at the stunt show ever and sort of like get to see the other side of it?
Absolutely. I worked my way into that. No problem. I actually did. I did a great service for Imagineering and for my own benefit. But at Imagineering, they have the photo library where everything is documented, and you want to see the Jungle Cruise Gorilla Camp, and you go and you type it in, and it comes back 100 pictures. There's no documentation on the show. So they said, yeah, come on out. So not only did I get to geek out and run around the Epic Stunt Spectacular, which was a dream, but I took a couple thousand photos of the stunt show, which are now in the database of every possible angle you could ever imagine. But it was very fun, and I did talk them into letting me crack a whip in Cairo, so that I do have a photo of that. And and a photo standing next to the plane. So yeah, it was great.
After doing indie fans, how do you feel like the fan culture on Indiana Jones has evolved? Do you think it's a little different than it was? I mean, what's that movie? 10 years, 15 now, 20? I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I feel like we're the lucky of the fan bases, unlike the Star Wars fans that take everything so serious. And I love Star Wars fans. I love Star Wars. I feel like indie comes along and you release something like Crystal Skull and everybody goes, ugh. And then they just move on with their day. Like, we don't even want to talk about it. It's fine. Let's just forget that happened.
Let's talk about Crystal Skull then. Where do you land on Crystal Skull?
Do we have to?
I think we have to somewhat. What I would say, the thing that I've always told people, and we'll get a little more when we get into indie nerd round. I've seen indie grab the tail of dragons in comic books. I can kind of deal.
Sure.
But I think that's the best. I don't know, sort of like level thing I can give it. It's not my favorite in any stretch of imagination, but
sure. It's funny how, like you said, the comics, and I've been reading a bunch of them lately now that I'm working on a comic, but it's funny how your mind accepts certain things that you're like, he can fly on the back of a dragon. That's cool. But there's some things that you're like, no, that would never happen in real life. And it's just like, why is that okay? My biggest problem with Crystal Skull was I just felt like no one took it serious. Like, I felt like the only thing I liked, the one big part that I really liked is I liked the car pulling up and then pulling Indy out of the trunk, because that fit and that seemed like it was totally in character. And you're like, oh God, now what's he doing? Yeah. What is he getting himself into now? But I feel like the rest of it just didn't. Just let's look for every thing that we feel is funny that no one else does. Which, I can go down a huge rabbit hole on Spielberg and all that, and how those guys scare the bejesus out of me. But I don't know. It just felt like no one really took it serious. I mean, even down to poor John Williams, who is one of the greats. I felt like even his score was just recycling old cues from the last three. Like, it's fine. So, yeah.
I always say that I knew there was going to be a problem. I was in the movie. It was the first screening I'd seen it, and Karen Allen shows up, and she's walking towards Indy, and I was like, oh, he's going to get punched in the face. And she walks right by him, and I was like, this is not correct. And from that moment on, I was like, nope, we're on. I was like, we're off.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's tricky, because one of the things that, a lot of these films have is we all feel we have an ownership to them, even though we don't. But it is fun to sit and you go, no, she wouldn't have done that. How do we know what she would have done? But it's just like,
Yeah. Let's do a little nerdy indie round, some quick fires.
Okay.
The original novels, we're talking Genesis Deluge and Sky Pirates and Where Do You Land? Those were huge for my childhood.
Yeah, I've got them all right here. I like a lot of the Max McCoy, the later novels, I think are great. I think he captured them perfectly. And then he did the smart thing is he brought in, this one's got Sala and Marcus right on the cover, but he brought in a lot of those characters we all know and love. The Dinosaur Eggs is a great novel, but yeah, I've been rereading them lately, and they're all pretty darn good. Surprisingly, I really don't have one that I go, that one's kind of cheesy. They're pretty good.
Yeah, and I always wanted them to import the German novels that never got translations, but maybe someday.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
I would love to dig into those. Yeah,
almost worth learning German just to make that happen.
Almost.
Marvel or Dark Horse? Where do we land on Marvel or Dark Horse when it comes to comics?
Ooh, my knowledge of comics is about as in depth as my knowledge of video games. Unless you are making a Indiana Jones or Ghostbusters comic or video game, I have no knowledge. I really like old Marvel indies just because literally they were done so perfectly that every issue left him falling out of a plane or hanging on the side of a truck. You know, every issue was a cliffhanger. The Dark Horse ones, I think, do a great job as a little complete story. But there's something pretty great about those Marvel ones, that they were just handled perfectly as a great old pulp serial.
Well, and this is, of course, a video game question, so this might not be good, but I'm hoping. Fate of Atlantis or Infernal Machine?
Fate of Atlantis all the way, baby.
Yeah. That's sort of an easy one, I think, for most people.
Infernal Machine is great. But yeah, Fate of Atlantis, my sister and I will live or die by that game. No question. No question. And even like the Last Crusade computer game was great, but she actually texted me a couple weeks ago, and she was like, what do I trade the guy in the market? Is it the squab on the stick, or is it the baseball? You know, she was playing it again, and yeah, it was, and I can hear lines from that game in my head, no problem.
Yeah, for sure. I always wanted that, if they couldn't get Harrison Ford for Indiana Jones Adventure at Disneyland, I just wanted that guy's voice in place of it, because that's the only other voice my head canon can take for some reason. But
right.
For sure. So how do you end up, so we'll move forward a little bit. You end up doing stage manager stuff over at Imagineering in around 2008. What's that transition like?
Around Crystal Skull time, we were doing panels at Comic-Con. We had an indie fan panel at Comic-Con. Through that, I met a few people, Tony Baxter being one of them. And then one of his friends, Josh Shipley, and I got to know each other real well, who I literally just posted that he's going to be on the show in a couple weeks. But it was literally the right place, right time scenario. It was getting to know Josh and getting along great, and literally him going, hey, send me your resume. There's something, coming up. And I sent it to him. And 2 days later, I was working at Imagineering. So, I mean, it was literally right place, right time. And I was just doing random things. Stage managing was one of them, lighting, printing out presentation boards, just doing whatever needed to be done. And then I did that for about a year and a half, just doing random jobs around Glendale. And then one day they called and wanted to know if I could come in and document props, which, sure, sounds fine. But then that ultimately became, no, we need another prop guy. I mean, I knew about props as far as what I collect and what I have at home. But, that quickly snowballed into 8 years at WDI.
Well, and you did a small stint over at Universal doing shows, right? You were doing... I'm trying to think. You did Creature of the Black Lagoon, didn't you? The musical?
Oh, man.
So this is the question. As someone who truly loves Universal Monsters, that is either an enjoyable Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode of a show, or it's like an abomination. So where did you, as someone going in and having to do that show, it didn't last long. It was, I think, 8 months, 9 months tops.
No, I was there. I was the opening and closing crew. That was in the middle of after I first got released from WDI. I have the habit of going, hey, I've never done that. And I thought, I've never worked at Universal Studios Hollywood. Let's go do that. So I went over there and did that for a while. And I was part of show control.
A group that controls the shows and controls the audiences. So my shift was the Blues Brothers stage show, Waterworld, which was great and I always loved, special effects show, and Creature the Musical. And I was pumped and I was excited because I love Creature. He's probably my favorite monster. And I thought, oh, this will be great. This will be so fun. And they brought us all in for preview one day, and I just remember sitting there just staring, going, what in the world am I looking at?
Yeah.
And needless to say, it was about that well received with the audience.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's this weird
You win
oddity.
some, you lose some, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't, ugh.
It's it's an interesting piece. It also has Matt Lauer being creepy about women, so that's weird now. So there's a lot about Creature that doesn't age so great. But you also mentioned Waterworld, which is a classic when it comes to stunt shows. And of course, you just finished up work doing Waterworld's land, doing props for that over in Beijing. So what made you fall in love with, were you always a Waterworld fan? I mean, it's a prop, when you watch the movies, it's a prop lover's heaven. So how did you get involved in loving Waterworld?
Yeah, no, I had always loved Kevin Costner. He's one of my favorites. I can watch anything that Kevin does. And I had just always loved Waterworld. And the show, I mean, even if you don't like the movie, which I know the large percentage seems to not, there's no arguing that show is great. I mean, that is a great show. It's the #1 rated show in Universal Hollywood. It's the #1 rated live show I think that Universal's ever done. That show's amazing. So yeah, when Beijing rolled around, and I was wrapping up Pandora. I was working on Pandora, to talk about an opportunity to do something really different after being at Disney for 8 years, to do a rusty, violent, war-based apocalypse. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's an interesting take for sure. And I was curious what that was like. Did you take things that you learned about doing rusty and old from Pandora, and was that an easy transfer? Because there are similar aesthetics in the sense that they are full of things are in there for quite some time, being kind of retooled for other purposes. Did that sort of talent from Pandora help make that transition into Waterworld easier or harder because it's a different sort of genre onto itself?
You know, honestly, I don't think I ever thought back about Pandora when doing Waterworld. Now that you say that, I go, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. What made Waterworld so fun and so crazy was the fact that I could really use anything in the world, because that's our world, that's our story. So you know, I mean, I could buy a traffic light and then rust it up and make it work. The most fun was doing things that taking a normal object and then turning it into something that the atollers would use, and how they would use it. What did they, they probably a real good chance they didn't even know what it was. But how would they use it in their everyday life? That was fun. That was fun to sit down and actually figure out some cool story beats for that.
So you end up back over at Imagineering, doing show writing and set decorating for the Enchanted Tiki Bar, and then of course Grotto later on. And you've probably answered every question there is about both of these ad nauseum. So we're going to try to find new ways to sort of look at these a little bit. First of all, how did you get the job back at Imagineering? Did you was it a writing gig they were looking for somebody for at first, or did you get there? And if I remember correctly, you got there and then you were obsessed with this project.
Yeah. So I had only been there a couple of weeks when they announced that Trader Sam's was going to become a thing. And I printed it out from the Disney Parks blog and ran it into my boss's office. And I said, I got to do this. I knew Jungle Cruise, obviously. I knew Adventureland. I had my indie, adventure archaeology brain. And I said, I'm doing this. No problem. And thankfully he didn't just go, who are you? How, you've been here a week. What are you talking about? But Kevin Rafferty was our show writer in the beginning, and he and I worked together great. And then he got super swamped on Cars Land, being the writer for Cars Land. And it ultimately went from, hey, let's work and collaborate on stuff, to, hey, I'll write stuff, I'll send it to you for buy off, to him going, I don't even have time to buy off on stuff. I trust you. Do your thing. Have a great time. Call me if the place burns down, type of thing. So yeah, eventually I just kept going. So yeah, just through chaos comes opportunity, and I feel like that was very much how that project went, because that was at the time when we were doing World of Color, Little Mermaid, New Parade. I mean, there was a lot of much higher profile projects at the time that I don't think anybody was really worried about what the new kid was going to do, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. But you mentioned Kevin Rafferty. I had the opportunity to interview Kevin. And I should say that another friend of yours that you worked with, Ray Spencer, says hello.
I love Ray.
But
I miss Ray every day. I miss working with Ray.
Kevin was a great interview, and I was just curious about. He's of course retiring after doing Runway Railway. I'm curious about your experience doing creative collaboration with him. Of course, he was a busy guy, and he was really busy doing Cars Land. But at the same time, he seems, from everyone that I've talked to, seems like a real creative giver as much as he is someone to collaborate with.
Yeah, no, he is. He's great to collaborate with. He's just fun to be with. I mean, he's one of those types of guys. Same with Ray, right? You just want to, you can do really great things with guys that you just want to hang out with. If you just want to spend time with your team, then you got a great team. So yeah, Kevin was great. Kevin definitely is one that will trust you if you know what you're doing, and will back you up, which is huge. And I mean, without guys like Ray, without guys like Kevin, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. But those especially those two, trusted me to really, really go for it on that first one. And then when we got to Grotto, Kyle Barnes, who was our art director for the whole Polynesian overview, same thing. I mean, he trusted me to do my thing. And those three guys I give a lot of credit to for just letting me become who I am, whatever that means. But yeah, to just develop myself and figure out what, learn from my mistakes and jump into the fire.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the Polynesian, because I feel like it's still shocking to me. I moved to Florida a couple years ago, but Florida is not a place where you would think there'd be a lot of tiki bars, but there's not.
Sure.
And there's basically
there's like three.
Grotto, there's Suffering Bastard, and then Mai Kai. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Central Florida never took off in the same way that California did?
I feel like my reason, and you can kind of take it or leave it with California, but I feel like almost with Florida, it's, tiki bars were created to provide escapism, and I kind of feel like when you're living in a state that's surrounded by a beach, do you really need that much escapism?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's accurate. I've kind of always related it to that logic when I've had to sit down and think about it. California's got a ton of beaches too, but yeah, there's something about California. San Francisco's got 12 tiki bars alone. They're everywhere in California. Oregon, they've got great ones. So they're in need of some escapism up there. But I don't know why it didn't click in Florida and still hasn't. I don't know why it still hasn't taken off.
I think there's something about how California, and if you go to Disneyland, California is still a local park. Disneyland's a local park in many ways. And here it is a ton of tourism coming in.
Absolutely.
And when people come in, the ecosystem has been created both at Universal and Disney to keep people in. That's the idea, because then they spend money at the place.
Sure.
Hence why places like Grotto were created, right? And that's great.
Sure.
But I think there's got to be something to that, where tourism, when you're coming into a place, you're there for specific entertaining reasons, and you're not necessarily looking outside of that realm. And tiki bars were those local places for people to escape.
Right. Elvis Trooper makes a perfect point. Our 20 amusement parks we have here are an escape. I think those areas that don't have the chaos that Central Florida has, that's why they have, tiki bars. That's why they have, and not just tiki bars.
As someone who is now done a career of doing props and finding things, did you find was that a mentorship from somebody that you learned how to find the right props, or was it just trial and error for yourself over lots of time, realizing what should be grabbed instead of what to leave on the shelf and how to...
Ultimately, each Sam's takes about a year and a half to buy for, because there's about 1,600 props in Anaheim. There's about 1,500 props in Orlando. And ultimately, in all honesty, it came down to what I personally thought was cool looking. Simple, it really was. So when you go into Sam's, I always tell people you're in here, because that's exactly anything in there is stuff that I would have bought for myself. So yeah, that was kind of which I think, and through that I have since learned, obviously for other projects you learn, but I feel like for the Sams and anything adventure related, that seems to be my winning method, is just pick things that I like.
What do you find to be the hardest sort of props to get? What are the ones that, and I mean, I guess there's unique things that are difficult to get, but what are the things that you would think, man, these should be everywhere, but they're not? What did you find to be the hardest stuff?
Portholes, super hard to find, very expensive. Dive helmets, very expensive. Anything made out of that copper brass, that stuff is really tough. And then the other hard thing is actually automobiles, because a lot of car collectors, a lot of people that have a car in good enough shape that you would want to put in a theme park, do not want you to take it and bolt it to the ground in a theme park.
Yeah.
I've done a couple vehicles for Disney, and then obviously some boats for Waterworld. The boats weren't an issue, but when you go and you buy a 1937 Packard coupe and you go, I'm going to gut it and put it in a theme park, that guy's not too happy with you.
Yeah. I guess I'm shocked that it seems, I don't know, this is me showing my ignorance, but I guess I would assume that it would be simpler or cheaper to just model a car and put it in the park, like just fake it, than buy the genuine thing and gut it. But is it, I mean, I guess it's just time intensive to model it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like for the example of like the Packard coupe, that's on Buena Vista Street. It's
Right.
at Oswald's gas station right when you walk in. Cars like that you can't really fake. I mean, it's such a style. It's so much detail. They're built like tanks. You don't want somebody to walk up and tap on it and go, "Oh, that's plastic." So yeah, there's some things you could do. If you need to buy a Jeep that gets thrown into a planter in Adventureland, you could probably cheat it. You could probably get away with it pretty good. But when you're doing hero vehicles that essentially do become photo ops. There's the Grizzly Peak Rambler station wagon we did, that Ray and I also did together, has its own Instagram page. So you want them to look real. You want them to look good when they're going to become something that are going to be in everyone's family photo for the rest of time.
Yeah. You also did set decorating for Star Tours, and from what I could tell, every single revamp was
did them all.
Doing.
Yeah. That was kind of crazy.
What sort of props? I mean, I like it. I've been in the newer variation for so much that I'm trying to take it and try to figure out what was different. But what sort of props did you have to sort of acquire for Star Tours?
When it started out, it was all of the new pieces of luggage in the queue, a lot of that stuff. By the time it was said and done, by the time everybody got their work figured out, I did very little, but I provided all of the props that are in the scanning stations in that second part of the queue where the droid is doing all the x-rays. Mm-hmm. So any of the props inside on the monitor were mine. And then the actual dimensional prop that I did in all of them is when you walk by C-3PO, he's got his little clipboard on his rail, and it's got a little holder. So the clipboard actually came from the filming of the show. Anthony Daniels wanted something he could hold and something different. So they sent me the actual little prop that they had made for the pre-show video, which was a dry erase board with some buttons super hot glued to it. I mean, it was just a perfect movie prop because it would last about a day. But so I had to take those, find the pieces that they used, which was a chore, and then make it look real. So we gave it, an off position black clear monitor front to it, and then I sketched out and designed the little charging station that it would sit in, and put the little Star Tours emblem on the front, and then there's a little metal decal on the bottom that nobody can see, but in Arabic or Arabish it says, basically if there's any malfunctions to call me. It's got my extension in there, and nobody will ever see it, but it was cool working. I mean, again, growing up with Star Tours, and that was always one that I loved, especially the original. So yeah, it's cool to have the Star Tours team jacket that's got the logo, and yeah, that's a good one.
Let me ask you about another collaboration. We already talked a little bit about Pandora, but I am just completely fascinated by Joe Rhode as a person, who's basically like an explorer in real life.
Oh yeah.
And I really truly, Animal Kingdom is my favorite park, and I really truly consider it to be his park.
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I'm just curious, like, when you're dealing with someone who is so invested, not only in the aesthetics, but also the ethos of a park, what is that experience like working with him to get Pandora to not feel, what's the term I'm looking for? To not feel shoved in, but to feel like totally a part of what the overall feeling of the park is. What's that like?
Yeah, no, we Joe's great. I mean, Joe is exactly what you want him to be. I kind of feel that I finished my college working with Joe. Every meeting was a learning. It was like going to a lecture. And Joe was great. The first time I met Joe was working on Trader Sam's, and I had bought all the masks for the wall. And somebody said, you should make sure these are culturally, appropriate, make sure everything's good. And I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. No problem. And they're like, go sit down with Joe one day and just go through them. And literally I took a picture, printed out a picture of every mask that I had bought, took him the stack, and he went, okay, let's take a look. And he went, yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, like literally that fast, just flipping the papers. And he goes, all those are fine. And he goes, and now let's talk about this stack here. And he went through every mask and explained, well, this is what this carving means, this, and this is what this means. And this, so it's like just sitting with him is unbelievable. And one of those guys that doors always open and more than willing to teach you about something. We all felt a little weird about Avatar. No lie, when I think everyone did when it got announced. We all kind of, even on it, were like, I don't know. But, when you had Joe and you went, you know what? I bet you Joe will figure this out. And sure enough, he did. I mean, I don't, as much as there's other great guys, I don't think anybody could have figured that out but Joe, especially in that park, especially how to make it work. And we had a lot of freedom too, because our land takes place like 100 years after wherever James Cameron ends up with his movies. So we really didn't have to refer back to the movie that much. We could really just work it into the park as it should be. So no, it could have been a very interesting project, a very, we don't talk about that one much, but no, I'm very, very proud to have been part of Pandora because of Joe and working with Joe and just being around him. And it was great. My favorite Joe story, at the time, I had a cubicle in one of the mini trailers, and I was just getting boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of props in, and everybody was going crazy because I just had boxes everywhere. Nobody could get through the trailer. So they kicked me out of that trailer and gave me my own trailer in the parking lot. And it was great. And we turned it into the prop trailer. We had our own little conference room. It was awesome. And Joe would frequently come over there just to kind of take a break. And, obviously nobody's going to look for the executive hanging out in the prop trailer. And I have a great picture of him sleeping in front of my desk on a roll of paper towels on the floor. We had a dry erase board, and every morning I'd walk into something new that he had drawn on the board. I mean, he was great. And again, very collaborative, very inspirational guy to work with. I mean, no doubt about that.
You have said in the past that Hollywood Studios is your favorite park. I would say that park has done drastic changes over the last, couple years. So does it remain your favorite, or has that shifted to a different park at this point?
Animal Kingdom's the favorite. I think, Hollywood Studios obviously is your favorite when you're young, and, you got the indie show and Star Tour and blah, 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 and all those. But when you get down to really design and you get down into making something really, really good, there's no beating Animal Kingdom nowadays. That park's amazing. I mean, you could, back to what you said earlier about taking black and white photos. I mean, you could go through that park and take pictures in period clothes and people would swear that you're in Africa. I mean, there's never a moment where you think you're in a theme park. And then, yeah,
I did Dapper Day at Animal Kingdom, and I can attest to that fact. It's very much, it's everywhere you turn.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, very authentic photo op. Let me, a couple of little things to finish up here. Of course, we talked a little bit about the field guide to Tiki decorating, the comic book coming out, which is amazing. Gonna have to ask the question everyone asks, which is, when is volume 2 of the field decorating? When is that
Volume
field
2
guide?
is outlined. Volume 2 is, we figured out what we want to do. The unfortunate answer at this exact moment is due to scheduling. Is due to the fact that myself and Typhoon Tommy are slammed on a few new projects. He still has to go over to Beijing and finish up over there. I'm up to my knees in Epic Universe. Today I'm up to my knees. Sometimes it goes a little higher, but today's a good day. So yeah, it really is a scheduling thing, but we've got it figured out. We know what we want to do, so we'll get there.
Cool.
In the meantime, there's a comic.
Yeah, the comic's coming out, so everyone has something to read. I would be a terrible journalist if I did not because you can't tell me anything about Epic Universe, and I'd like you to keep your job. I'm just going to ask: I
appreciate that. It is epic. It is very epic.
Yeah. Let's do a quick nerdy lightning round. These are not fair questions.
Okay.
And we'll just see where you land. A lot of just choices. OG Trader Sam's or East Coast Trader Sam? And that is the character, not the bar.
Oh, dear. I will say that I probably honestly like East Coast better because it's a great Mark Davis design. So that's hard to beat.
That's hard to beat. Confrontation or Jaws the Ride?
Confrontation.
Oh, that's interesting. Of course you're
very
much a Jaws person.
Everybody, but
what about Confrontation? Do you just you adore?
Again, the memories of going with my family and my grandfather. I've got a picture of him with me and my sister when we were, that big in the giant Kong photo op that was at the end of the ride. That's sitting on my desk at work right now. Yeah, that was just a kick-ass ride. I mean, and to do something that big and that much scale inside a building. I mean, that ride's ridiculously cool. And definitely one of those that I wish that I could do it now because I have good memories of it, but I think now I would be so much more, just
focused on
studying and blown away.
Yeah.
Jaws is great. I love the Jaws ride because it's always it's the adult Jungle Cruise. I get it. No problem. But hot dog, that Kong ride, man, that's good stuff.
Pretty epic. Yeah. I always say if people miss Jaws the Ride, all they have to do is go to SeaWorld because the whole movie takes place there. So it's
I love going over there because, man, I take pictures all the time of that and I love that movie. So
yeah,
that one's great.
I weirdly, it's a terrible Jaws movie, but it's a wonderful attractions showcase.
It's great.
Sure.
It's so great.
It's so good. This is one I don't even like asking because I find it too difficult. Raleigh Crump or Mark Davis?
Oh, that hurts.
I know.
But I also feel not fair to compare them.
I know. That's why I said it's not a fair question. Who do you find that you enjoy more? I don't think it'll hurt Raleigh.
That is probably the meanest question anyone's asked me. Rolly is great. I love Rolly. I've gotten to spend time with Rolly. Rolly's awesome. Oh man, I feel I got to go more with Mark on that one.
Raleigh might too. Raleigh is like the kindest guy
Oh,
he's
yeah.
a straight shooter. So
Yeah.
Davis, man, that it's a hard.
Yeah,
But I take
kinda
both
gotta go with
any day
Mark.
of the week. Final weird question: Rocketeer or Dick Tracy? Who wins?
This took a turn.
Yeah, these are hard questions. I'm a gotcha journalist apparently.
Oh man, I feel like hanging up on you for that question. Oh, how do you compare? How do you choose? I mean,
I
are.
don't know.
Oh man, I'll just short of throwing back a snarky response like the president. I don't know if I want to answer that question.
It could be it can be a squeaker. It doesn't have to be a far race. They're both very good.
Man, I love me some Dick Tracy. I got all my rock. Oh yeah. Next question. Move along. We're moving along.
That's I had a great conversation when I was talking to Kevin. I really drilled him on the Dick Tracy ride that never got made because it is my number one. Look, there's a lot of great unmade rides. There's something about that ride though that is a little bit 20s era of great movie ride sets plus infrared Tommy guns. I can't ask for more. That's it. That's all the questions I had. And though we went through some struggles here getting into work, thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, Nathan.
And that's it for this episode of Dreamfinders. Thanks so much to Brandon for chatting with me, and make sure to keep up with what he's doing at traderbrandon.com. Dreamfinders is edited by Shannon Mickelson with quality control by Ben Harris. It's hosted and produced by yours truly, Nathan Hartman, who you can follow on Twitter at SomeStuffISaid. Our podcast artwork is provided by JP Tanner. Find his other work at tanwoodcreative.com. This podcast is distributed by WDW News Today, the worldwide leader in Disney Parks news. Read all they have to offer at WDWNT.com. Tell your friends about the show, and please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if for some reason you or someone you know would make a great guest on this program, feel free to email us at dreamfinders@WDWNT.com. I'm Nathan Hartman, and remember, if we can dream it, then we can do it.